Do not think otherwise, because Cael Sanderson would absolutely want Bo Bassett to commit to Penn State.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State wrestling, and as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State wrestling and Penn State football. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine and never missing one of these daily shows. Thank you for being subscribed to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. All of the support here on Locked On Nittany Lions. We're talking more about Bo Bassett and why, not that this needs to be said, but I did see some comments that, Penn State, does Penn State really want Bo Bassett? So we're going to talk about why Penn State would want and need Bo Bassett, the recruiting ripple effect if Bassett were to commit, stay home in the state of Pennsylvania, and what went wrong with Iowa. How did this decommitment happen now that some details have emerged? Beginning with Bo Bassett specifically, does it, like I said, does this really need to be explained? Bo Bassett is, conservatively speaking, a top 5 pound for pound prospect in the class of 2026. And it's more than just that, but I want to begin with the talent alone that in the entire nation, Bassett, and that's my opinion, because if you look at other rankings, you will see that Bassett's still the number 1 overall prospect, ahead of Jax Forrest, ahead of Jaden James, who is committed to Penn State, Drayshawn Ross, the heavyweight prospect committed to Oklahoma State. So if we're talking about those 4 prospects, look, I think there's a case now for Jax Forrest to be the number 1 overall consensus prospect. I think he's kind of shown enough on the freestyle circuit. I get it. It's freestyle compared to folk style, but the wrestlers that Forrest is defeating still in high school, and Bassett did well, but arguably could have performed better on the freestyle circuit here as of late. So maybe a little bit of recency bias here, but I think Jax Forrest takes the top spot. Jaden James has certainly impressed me. And of course, the scouts, the experts that are making these rankings. So I think there's a little bit of debate where Bassett lands between 2, 3, and 4. That's why I say, conservatively speaking, top 5. But that's nothing to bat an eye at. That's really not something anybody should complain about, that, oh, he's not the number 1 guy anymore. Why should Penn State take him then? No, you still take a top 5 recruit in the nation. Again, this is pound for pound rankings. But Bassett fits into this Penn State model that Cael Sanderson continues to emphasize: offense, and then some more offense, score at will, put up tech falls, put up pins. Now, Bassett's doing that in high school, easier said than done at the collegiate level, but that's what Penn State expects from its wrestlers, guys that are so offensively gifted they can score at will and they can just put up bonus points at ease. And Bassett can do that at the collegiate level, if and when he continues to develop. So that's why Penn State would really want him, because he checks the boxes that Penn State wants in a talented wrestler, the way that his game would translate to the college level. And he's already proven that he's going to do that. He's not breaking a comfort zone or anything, that he's this passive wrestler. No, it's that machine gun mindset that Bassett really emphasizes. Penn State's also going to want him, need him, because you keep a talented wrestler home rather than going to a competitor. Iowa, I've said this before and I'll say it again, that really was, even though Penn State as a program is great enough, is elite enough to offset it, still wasn't ideal when it was reality at the time. This is a break for Penn State in some regard, because it prevents not only a talented prospect from going to a direct competitor within the Big Ten. Oklahoma State's another situation, because Penn State won't face them until the postseason. But Iowa, Big Ten Conference dual meet, right? Somebody that is truly a rival. Oklahoma State still needs to build up that momentum before I say that, okay, Penn State is going to be a direct rival with them throughout the entirety of the season there. And Iowa can be considered that to an extent. So in that process, Bassett leaving the state of Pennsylvania, and then the dialogue that happened all around it at the time, that, hey, we're going to build a pipeline that takes wrestlers out of central Pennsylvania and sends them to Iowa. Okay, it's not exactly, like I said, it's not exactly ideal. It's not concerning because, again, Penn State can go and recruit anybody from anywhere within the country and clearly outside of the country with Masanosuke Ono. But you get my point, is that still a chunk, potentially a chunk of recruiting is going to be taken out of your own backyard and go to Iowa, who clearly, obviously, is out for revenge in some capacity there. And now all of that has gone away. So it's preventing the negative aspects of recruiting. Now, you get that if you can land his commitment. You get Bassett. You get the draw that he brings, not only Melvin Miller, Keegan Bassett, right? The Bassett family, but friends, other prospects are going to want to wrestle alongside Bo Bassett. He's created a lot of strong connections over the years through his wrestling career. So he has that cachet. He brings the spotlight with him. Now, depending on who you, because that was the other end of the argument. Well, that Penn State shouldn't want the spotlight. They shouldn't want the attention. They should avoid it. I think you can manage the spotlight. I don't know that Bassett is necessarily egregious with it. He has it, but it's how you manage it. And I think Penn State would be up to the challenge to manage it. So that's obviously something to keep an eye on, and the negative aspects of it. But I think Penn State's the program to be able to utilize it and utilize it well to a benefit for the program in a way. It also continues to build out this recruiting core. So I say that Oklahoma State isn't quite there as a true rival yet. And in that breath, Oklahoma State's class of 2026 has 5 of the top 10 overall recruits in the nation. Again, pound for pound. Because right now in 2026, clearly you've seen Penn State take a step back when you compare them to what they did in 24 and 25. But if you're able to add Bo Bassett, you now have 2 prospects within, again, the top 5, and depending on who you ask, 2 within the top 3. Okay, Oklahoma State doesn't even have that. Again, depending on who you ask. You also have Sam Herring, who is a teammate of Bo Bassett. So you strengthen up your Pennsylvania recruiting. Not that Penn State really needs to do that, but you don't allow it to weaken in any sort of regard. You really want to prevent Oklahoma State from trying to circle the wagons here and pull off this recruitment, because I do believe that Penn State should be considered the favorite at this point. Again, there's already allegedly been a visit paid by Cael Sanderson. I haven't really been able to confirm that myself, but let's be honest here. It would shock me if Cael Sanderson and Penn State did not make a visit directly to Bo Bassett, because it is a hop, skip, and a jump. David Taylor has to get on the private jet and fly all the way to Pennsylvania to make it happen. But you build this nucleus. You don't fall too far behind Oklahoma State in the scheme of recruiting here for this 2026 class. I got to give David Taylor and the Cowboys credit for what they have built. Bo Bassett is able to cut into that deficit because Penn State is trailing for the 2026 class in comparison, but Oklahoma State is still responding to what Penn State did in 2024 and 2025. So Iowa doesn't get to move forward. They don't get to take any steps forward. Penn State only gets stronger with this, and there's more to it. So I'm started to talk about the recruiting ripple effect here. Let's get into more of that, because it's not just about the 2026 class, 27, 28. I'll explain that more coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever wish managing money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Now, for me personally, I want to build up my savings. I want to be able to have an emergency cash fund for any reason. If it is a big purchase or if it's just something that gives me a safety net. And Monarch Money is able to help me do that, gives me the insights that I need to continue to manage my wealth. And again, and it's not just about me. If I wanted to include a partner, if I wanted to include a loved one, you can do that as well. So Monarch Money gives you control over your finances, whether you're working individually or working together with somebody else as well. It's about taking control, and you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for, get this, 50% off your first year. That's right. 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. I started to talk about it a little bit because how could you not? It isn't just about the individual Bo Bassett. It is about the Bassett family. And particularly, maybe Keegan Bassett doesn't get enough credit in this conversation as well. Most people are going to talk about, Melvin Miller. It's going to be 2027. When Bo Bassett was committed to Iowa, everybody penciled Melvin Miller, including myself, to Iowa because that was the logical explanation, right? But now neither of them. So Bassett doesn't have Iowa in his top three. It's Nebraska. Nebraska's actually jumped into this recruitment here. But Melvin Miller re-released his top 8. And I do think it's a formality, but wherever Bassett goes, I do think Melvin Miller and Keegan Bassett are going to follow. And the schools that are best suited to do that are Penn State, Oklahoma State, and I will give Nebraska its due. I do think that Nebraska would be able to recruit all three and give them an extremely positive outlook. And I'm going to get into more of why it didn't work out for Iowa. There's one thing that Iowa does not have that Penn State and Oklahoma State specifically do that ultimately led to this relationship ending between the Hawkeyes and the Bassetts. But the recruiting ripple effect is that Penn State, in theory, if they land his commitment, would get a top 3 prospect, top 5 conservatively in the 2026 class, and then the number 1 overall consensus prospect in 2027, and Keegan Bassett in 2028, who's going to be who's already a highly touted prospect, and when he's more reliably ranked, will be routinely ranked. He will be a top prospect in the nation. And you also get somebody that's a middleweight. Bo Bassett's going to be 149. Maybe he ends up at 157 for all we know at the end of his collegiate career. Melvin Miller is going to be 174, 184. I don't know if he pushes 197. I don't know that for sure. I've seen a lot of people say 74, 84, which makes a ton of sense. And Keegan Bassett would come in and in theory, compete for a lightweight spot. And Luke Lillidahl would be finishing his career by the time Keegan comes in as a true freshman and maybe would be able to take over at 125 or 133. Again, everybody develops differently, but that's the projection here. So Penn State gets an elite middleweight, an elite upperweight, and an elite lightweight over this 3-year span, almost all but guaranteed if you're able to secure one prospect in Bo Bassett. It also forces Oklahoma State to try to reshuffle again. They've done so well in 2026. And I don't want to look past 2025 too. I think 2025, they did very well. But Penn State, where they took somewhat, again, in comparison, Oklahoma State has all of these prospects in 2026. They have 5 of the top 10. Penn State did that in 2024. Penn State did that in 2025 too. And Masanosuke Ono is not ranked, but you could argue that Penn State, in theory, if he were to be ranked, has the number 1, number 2, and number 3 overall pound-for-pound recruits in the 2025 class between Marcus Blaze, PJ Duke, and Ono in that order. Good luck trying to sort that out. I've tried to figure it out. I have an episode devoted to it with Jeff Byers, but I don't even think we came to an ultimate conclusion as far as how 2025 finished up and if Ono should be number 1, if Duke should be number 1, or if it's Blaze. They're 1A, B, and C as far as there is a three-way tie for the number one overall prospect in that class. But Penn State, like I said, they're not falling too far behind, but you just don't give Oklahoma State as much of a lead. You get a head start in theory in 2027. You get even a further head start in 2028. And again, Bassett is going to be able to recruit himself. Penn State in recruiting doesn't need to be this aggressive program and go door to door and try to, because that's what Cael Sanderson has said this, how prospects will routinely contact Penn State, that they say that they express their interest and that they don't force recruitments anymore because they don't need to. And Bo Bassett, again, it just brings another wrestler with leverage, with cachet to where it's, I want to be at Penn State. I want to wrestle. I want to train alongside Bassett, alongside Jaden James, Melvin Miller for the future. And again, in Pennsylvania, it just allows you to be stronger in an area where you are already really strong. So that pipeline doesn't go anywhere else. It doesn't go to Iowa. It doesn't go to Oklahoma State if you are able to secure this commitment. Let's just talk about it for the sake of it. Again, I don't want to speak it into existence, but if you're Oklahoma State, and we know that Oklahoma State is pretty crowded in this 2026 class. The middleweights are pretty crowded for the next, I think, couple of seasons based on what I've gathered. I'm not an Oklahoma State expert here, so I'm not going to comment on them too much. I just know that it's crowded and there's not as ideal of a path for Bo Bassett when you compare the two between the Nittany Lions and the Cowboys. When you look at Penn State, it's obvious. 149, Shane Van Ness, he's got one more year when Bo Bassett's a true freshman. And in theory, you could have a lineup battle there. I think Bo Bassett is good enough to where he can challenge and push. I mean, we talked about it in the same breath with PJ Duke and Tyler Kasak. Bassett can absolutely push Shane Van Ness. Who would I choose to win that battle at this point? I would still take Van Ness. A red shirt would be good for Bo Bassett. I think it would be great. And then you just let him go for 4 years after that red shirt at 149. There you go. Someone who's a 4-year starter, instant All-American. And yeah, you would think that after that point, he would be a clear-cut title contender at that point in time. But we'll see. You don't want to allow that to go somewhere else. You don't want that to go to Oklahoma State. I think Nebraska would have the same kind of characterization, if you will, with the way of describing Iowa. They're in the Big Ten. They're trying to make a push. Nebraska really does have some present momentum. I don't know about long-term. I look at Oklahoma State 5-10 years from now. They kind of had the best setup. But I'm never going to overlook Mark Manning and what Nebraska is doing and why they have emerged in this top 3 here. So you don't want to fumble this opportunity that has really reopened here because Iowa couldn't figure it out. So that's where Bo would project. And then looking long-term, that's where Melvin Miller would project, Keegan Bassett, and he'd be right. You have 149 figured out all the way through up until 2030, past 2030, if it's going to be that 5-year plan there. So that's taken. Bo Bassett checks a lot of boxes here for Penn State that you want taken care of. The real story in all of this, though, as all the positives of when, you would hope that when this happens for Penn State, it really makes sense for the Bassett family to end up at Penn State at this point. But Iowa made an aggressive push. They got the commitment they wanted. And then now I'm seeing takes about remorse and that they had second thoughts and everything else and just how it all broke down. Let's talk about this more to wrap it all up here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is also brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes, and effects can last up to 36 hours. So you can stay confident and control in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer because over 150,000 men have already made that switch. You can head over to Rugiet.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege to get 15% off today. That is Rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. Use promo code lockedoncollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. I hinted at it earlier in the show of why this all really went wrong here. And it's because Iowa is not adapting with the times. Oklahoma State is. I would hope that other programs are. But that is why Penn State and Oklahoma State are the realistic threats, the realistic destinations in this recruitment. And Iowa, I hinted at this earlier in the show about what was that one thing that Iowa was missing, lacking, and what led to the decommitment here for Bo Bassett. I've seen different takes that the Bassett family felt entitled, and then you could blame the Brands brothers. I think it's truly a systematic issue, whether that's directly Tom Brands' fault because he's the head coach, or if this is just an Iowa wrestling program situation. Their RTC program is not reliable enough. Oklahoma State, first thing that David Taylor did was build the foundation. Penn State's had that. Penn State and Cael Sanderson did that immediately or as soon as they could by building out the training program. David Taylor realized this, did it right away. So that's where the miscommunication and everything, the house of cards started to fall apart in theory because Bo Bassett and Melvin Miller and Keegan Bassett wanted to train at Iowa. Okay, well, there's compliance issues. Look, I can't directly comment on that because the inconsistency that I see here, though, why don't any other programs have any issues with that? I've never heard that for Penn State, for Oklahoma State, that somebody can't train because of a compliance issue or anything like that. Then there's the travel costs and everything. Okay, if that's, look, we can all agree that if the Bassett family is demanding coverage for the travel and Iowa can't or isn't willing to give that to them, especially with the NIL that has already been negotiated and everything else, we can all agree that that is an issue there. But I really do think this stems from the core that Iowa doesn't have this long-term outlook. And if you're Bo Bassett, if you are Melvin Miller, Keegan Bassett, and you want to continue your wrestling career, you want to be fully invested, fully committed, you want to train there from day one until by the time you're ready to retire, Iowa's not the place to do that. Not for everybody. Okay, it works for Spencer Lee. I think it works for Austin DeSanto. That's who I would say is the core of the RTC program, is Spencer Lee and Austin DeSanto and nobody else. It is name after name after name after name for Penn State. Look at the senior level team. Look at the U23 team. Look at the U20 team. They are all not all, obviously I'm exaggerating there, but in some cases, more than half. The U23 team, 70% of them are made up with Nittany Lion Wrestling Club members. Not Iowa, not Nebraska, not even Oklahoma State. Penn State, Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. Iowa has Spencer Lee. Okay. And that was why Iowa would not want to pass on an opportunity like this in theory, because Bo Bassett can at least help with that. Build that pipeline, get people that are interested and start to build out the RTC. So I do think there was a reality check for Bassett and company that, oh, this might not truly be the best destination for us. Yeah, the NIL investment, the commitment to us, the financial commitment that they've offered is nice. But is it worth it? Because we can't even do things that we anticipated to do at an elite program. Why can that happen? Why can that occur at other programs, but not Iowa? Okay. So I think Jax Forrest, people said that Jax Forrest is able to train at Oklahoma State. He's committed. He's in the same class. What's the issue there? So I don't know exactly what the holdup is. I can understand Tom Brands' frustration. It depends. It's to each their own, because to one person, hey, these are reasonable requests. To somebody else, you're making demands that I don't want to give you. And in that process, that miscommunication, that misunderstanding led to a decommitment. Iowa's RTC program is not in a good spot, not where it should be to compete with Penn State and Oklahoma State for this foreseeable future. And until that gets fixed, then this is how it's going to continue to go. Iowa's going to be third. You hope maybe fourth, fifth. Nebraska's right there. So I don't know that. I think for the next 5 years, Penn State, Oklahoma State, Nebraska are your top three, and Iowa's on the outside looking in. Again, I think it is a little bit of a bad look as well for Iowa. The alleged, telling Bo's mother off, that a coach did that, head coach of the program. Again, that's all kind of word. We can all agree that it's a bad look. Did Iowa have buyer's remorse? That's where I want to finish with this. Did Iowa have buyer's remorse? Because it was allegedly a hefty investment. I don't know that Iowa was fully invested into Bo Bassett's recruitment. It felt like it was more of just a way to stick it to Penn State. Because after that duel, when they lost 30-8, that's when everything changed. That Iowa had enough of that. We need to make a change. This is how we're going to do it. And that's where I think it wasn't so much about landing an elite prospect. It was about keeping him away from Penn State. And that's not how you want to recruit. So Penn State's back in the driver's seat in my mind. If Oklahoma State wants to make a push, Nebraska wants to make a push, I think it's a very respectable. So Penn State needs to get this taken care of. You need to get a commitment sooner rather than later, because locking down Bo Bassett isn't about this cycle. It's about staying ahead and keeping up the pace that Penn State's been at for the next 5 years and then some. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Who do you think's to blame with all of this? Iowa, is it just business? Is it just business? Should Penn State go all in to try to secure this commitment? I really appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this episode. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine. If you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around all of your favorite Penn State sports teams.